Intelligent Systems are literally Nintendo's closest partners. Co-owners of Fire Emblem, developers of the Thousand Year Door, and the people who made Metroid Super, with nearly 4 decades of history, it's time to deep dive Paper Mario's makers. How many teams do they operate? How large are these teams, and how much crossover is there with Nintendo and between each department? Is it really true that WarioWare games rely on the same core group as Paper Mario? How controlling are EPD and how much freedom are Intelligent Systems given? And given that their long history is intimately tied up with Nintendo, why don't Nintendo just go ahead and buy them? Settle in as we explore the topic of Intelligent Systems. First, let's talk history. In the 1980s, Toru Naruhiro was hired as an external programmer for Nintendo to work with Gunpei Yokoi's team on classics like, among others, the original Kid Icarus. He was hired and later assembled a company to assist him in solving a quite specific problem. As he explained, our start point for making development tools was when Nintendo launched the NES system. It was totally different from today in that PCs were not yet used widely. Whether you did software or dev kits, back then there was neither, so we had no option but to make it all ourselves. For example, even graphic software for drawing pictures was something we devised by ourselves. These tools, though, soon became widely adopted. As Masahiro Sakurai recounted in a 2008 interview with Naruhiro-san, "When I first joined HAL Laboratory, there were development tools for the NES, and all of them were labelled with the Intelligent Systems logo. Seeing these devices around our office led me to think that maybe HAL Laboratory was working in a really close partnership with Intelligent Systems." He also noted that not only HAL Laboratory but other companies developing NES software were also using development tools from Intelligent Systems. Originally based in Nintendo's Kyoto Research Center and, since October 2013, a mere 10-minute walk from Nintendo's Kyoto corporate offices, the close relationship between Intelligent Systems and Nintendo soon blossomed. The company built up at a gradual pace in the early years, but the 1990 release of Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light was the first time they collaborated on a major new title. Although Nintendo's Keisuke Terasaki was the director, the scenario was devised by Intelligent Systems' Shuzo Kaga, who went on to develop 3 subsequent Fire Emblem titles. Intelligent Systems still hold the copyright for Fire Emblem jointly with Nintendo. As the 90s progressed, the company worked on a number of huge hit titles, from Mario Paint to Super Metroid to Mario Kart Super Circuit for Game Boy Advance. As you might expect from the 90s Japanese tech scene, the work culture was intense, with system programmer from Super Metroid Yoshikazu Mori recounting that the development room was pungent from body odor since the staff was so heavily into crunch mode towards the end of Super Metroid's development. Nevertheless, as the 90s drew to an end, Intelligent Systems started to narrow its work to primarily focusing on a core group of titles that, like Fire Emblem, they took the lead on. 1998 saw them revive their Famicom Wars franchise with Super Famicom Wars. 2000 saw them take on Paper Mario, and 2003 saw the launch of Wario Ware. The variety of Nintendo games they were developing, and for that matter, the handful of non-Nintendo games such as Cubivore Survival of the Fittest, published by Atlas, and a few Dragon Quest titles for Square Enix, dropped by the wayside. In 2007, the company had 94 employees, and it rapidly expanded since, crossing the 100 employees barrier by 2009 as it headed towards its current number of 175. What's particularly interesting on the Intelligent Systems website is that they also break down these employees quite precisely, so we can see that across the years, the company has a fairly consistent pool of about 60 to 70 people each in their graphic design and programming departments, around 10 each in sound and general affairs, 4 hard engineers, and the only area which has shown consistent growth is actually in their planning team, which has gradually inflated in size from 11 in 2006 to 22 in 2022. And although they have a consistent core hub of employees, the teams are further subdivided. Originally, there was a Team Emblem, appropriately named because they were responsible for the Fire Emblem titles, Team Shikamaru, known for Mario Paint, the Game Boy camera, and a whole lot of assist work, Team Battle Clash, responsible for various puzzle titles, and Team Deer Force on Super Metroid. But what about today? Well, let's deep dive the credits for the Switch-era Intelligent System games and see what is the extent of the overlap between these different departments. So firstly, let's look at Fire Emblem Three Houses and Paper Mario The Origami King. These titles released within a year of each other, and they had mostly completely separate teams, with the exception of the sound team, 2 of the technical support team, coordinators Kenji Yamada and Suba Hamano, and the senior producers for Nintendo and Intelligent Systems. Three Houses event illustrator Paul Petraschu had a special thanks on Paper Mario, and general producer for Paper Mario and WarioWare Toshio Sengoku also receives a special thanks on the Fire Emblem titles, but essentially the teams are independent. However, when it comes to Paper Mario and WarioWare, it's a different story. Looking specifically at the overlap between the Origami King and WarioWare Get It Together, since these were released within 18 months of each other, there is a large degree of crossover. The Origami King's director is credited for art on WarioWare. The level design lead for Origami King is a planner. 2 of their level designers went over, and a good chunk of the art department. In fact, it's easier to look at the WarioWare staff who weren't on Origami King, which comes down to Chief Director Goro Abe, who works for Nintendo EPD, only 11 out of 33 people on the planning team, and similar proportions of the art staff. Although the Paper Mario staff is considerably larger, as you would expect given the relative scales of the game, it's no coincidence that WarioWare titles usually follow a year or 2 after Paper Mario ones. Indeed, the remake status of the Thousand Year Door probably was significantly responsible for opening the door to the release of WarioWare Move It last year. This does mean that one tell for future Paper Mario remakes might be more, or at least larger scale, WarioWare titles, but that's a matter for another day's forecast. But while I've talked about 3 crucial franchises, let's just take a moment to explore 2 others that are really important to Intelligent Systems: Advance Wars and Pushmo. Anyone optimistic that Intelligent Systems might return to developing Advance Wars after the joyous yet tragically underappreciated Advance Wars 1+2 reboot camp will be in for a disappointment, as Way Forward massively took point on this title and the Intelligent Systems staff number just 3. Fire Emblem producers Toru Naruhiro and Masahiro Higuchi, plus Kenji Yamada, who has been a fixture across Intelligent Systems titles on development support before becoming a coordinator on Fire Emblem Three Houses. For the Pushmo series, we have to go back to 2015 Stretchmo to find the most recent credits. Setting aside the shared art and producerial staff, Stretchmo has 2 co-directors. Taku Sagioka has been credited only on system support for WarioWare Get It Together, while Misuzu Yoshida has not received a credit at all. This may mean that she's left the company, or it's equally possible that the pair are still working on prototyping new Pushmo concepts. Many 3DS titles from Dylan and Style Savvy to Art Academy and Steel Diver have yet to successfully make the jump to Switch, but Pushmo does seem like a curious oversight. It's worth pointing out that Intelligent Systems' average age for employees is 35, and given the relatively generous and equitable paternity and maternity laws in Japan, a small team like Pushmo's would be particularly vulnerable if any of its key people were on family leave. But wait, surely Nintendo's EPD would also have people involved as well. And yes, they do. Paper Mario has veteran producer Kensuke Tanabe overseeing, aided by his protege Risa Tabata, and overseen by several figures including Katsuya Iguchi, but in the main, the top talent working on Paper Mario titles are all Intelligent Systems people, replicating the kind of working relationship we see with Nintendo producers and Next Level Games, Retro Studios, and Mercury Steam. However, with the other franchises, Nintendo are rather more hands-on. WarioWare's director Goro Abe is a Nintendo employee, as is Three Houses co-director and Engage producer Genki Okoto and Kenta Nakanishi, the co-director of Engage. As much as Fire Emblem is the iconic Intelligent Systems franchise, Nintendo retains a finger very much on the pulse. On the other hand, Stretchmo credited a murderer's row of top talent as special thanks, from Paper Mario producer Kensuke Tanabe, 2D Mario Supremo Takashi Tezuka, and Monolith Soft and ND Cube director Keisuke Terasaki, but its small team were mostly Intelligent Systems, which of course may also explain why Pushmo hasn't made the jump to Switch, if Nintendo's core team at EPD aren't quite as invested in it as the team at Intelligent Systems. Intelligent Systems and Nintendo may be very close, but they are separate and do have different interests. The regular 4-year pattern of Paper Mario titles, the standard 2-year cycles of Fire Emblem games, and the regular peppering of WarioWare titles following a Paper Mario release speak to a company that isn't large enough to go for too long without a new game releasing. While Nintendo will happily sit on their franchises for years and years until they get the release right, Intelligent Systems can be relied on to release more titles and more often. But many people have said, why don't Nintendo just buy Intelligent Systems? Almost exclusively they've been working with Nintendo for 40 years, and their working relationship is incredibly close. But the fact is, Nintendo really don't need to. For one thing, each of these games aren't solely created by Intelligent Systems, but there are a whole network of small companies and support studios credited in the development of these titles. Nintendo wouldn't need to or even want to buy them all. Sure, Intelligent Systems has become larger and is a key partner for Nintendo, particularly when it comes to creative and planning work, but all their top titles are Nintendo properties anyway, so there's zero incentive for them to walk away. Besides, it makes sense for Nintendo to work with independent contractors a lot of the time. It means they keep their core team at Nintendo more focused, but can contract out on their own terms, rewarding regular partners with lucrative co-ownership deals over their IP. It should also be remembered that employment laws and employment customs in Japan are very different from many countries in the West, and letting staff go is especially tricky. Keeping staff as independent contractors allows Nintendo a level of protection in the case of hard times, although of course, even through the hardest times, they seem to have been able to give Intelligent Systems enough business to keep them afloat and to keep them thriving. If you'd like to see more of these company-specific deep dives, the playlist up here has you covered. Thanks for watching and see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.